I can recall standing on a roof at the age of 23, not knowing what my life had in front of me. All I knew is 50 feet down, and I didn't want to live anymore. In many ways, I was a 23-year-old man trapped inside of a 9-year-old's body, still grasping on to every masculine figure I could find to fill that void of my dad. My name is Josh Oxendine. Hear my story. I was one of those kids that literally went to church every single time the door opened. I was a really good kid, to be honest with you. And I went to school across the street from the church. I was at church on Wednesday night, on Sunday morning. I was at church as much as I can remember. I was one of those kids, honestly, that knew a lot about religion, knew a lot about God, and I just grew up around that environment. As far as I can remember, as a 9-year-old kid, I didn't have any issues. And then one day, it was just like out of the blue, my parents came up to me and they told me they wanted to get a divorce. As I think about stories of maybe like what it could possibly cause this, I remember one time where my dad had come home and he had been drinking, and I believe my mom had been doing the same, and they began to argue and they began to fight, and the next thing I know is I hear a door slam shut, and I look out the hallway and I see my dad dragging my mom by her hair down the hallway. And I looked at my dad and I yelled as a 6 or 7-year-old little kid, "Dad, leave Mom alone." And I remember him looking at me and telling him to be quiet and go back in my room. And as a 6 or 7-year-old little boy, thinking and crying in my pillow, the next thing I hear is my mom's head hitting the stairs outside of our trailer. To this day, that sound haunts me. As my dad left, I realized that there's nothing that I could have done to make him stay. And I remember my mom then sort of moving on, and it seemed like that my mom would date one guy and then another guy, and with each guy I would grasp onto every masculine figure that I could to try to fill this gap, this void, this emptiness my dad had left. And I didn't know how. But I remember just sitting there thinking, man, where did my life go wrong? Where did it go? I went from being this 9-year-old happy little boy to then all of a sudden my world being completely shattered. And there I was as a 13-year-old boy, completely unhappy, empty, not knowing what to think, not knowing how to feel, and searching for a daddy. So from 9 to 13, there were 4 years where all I did was just try to feel this emptiness, this gap, this void in my life that I didn't know how to feel. I'd try to put other men, other father figures, and I couldn't figure it out. And here I was as a 13-year-old boy in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. And I opened up my Bible and I began to read, and I came across a verse. It's Psalms 27:10, and it says this: "When my mother and father forsake me, the Lord will take me up." I had known of God to that point, but in this moment, man, I saw God shine like a father. I saw him shine like Abba, like Daddy. And I saw his love move from this angry Gandalf looking dude to this loving father wrapping his arms around me, filling the void that my parents had created. And I can say from this point on, my life would never be the same. Life moved on, and I think the more life moved on, I realized that I hadn't really dealt with a lot of the baggage that my parents had created. And at the time, I was a 23-year-old man, and I'd begin to make choices that can definitely be attributed back to the things that I had grown up seeing or doing. And I begin to make financial decisions and being in a financial hardship, and I began to get stressed with my job, and I was in a relationship that I shouldn't have been in. And all these things combined, along with really not even dealing with the things in the back of my head. And there I was at 23, I decided that the best thing for me to do was for me to end my life. So I decided to walk out at the time onto the roof of my house, and I wanted to kill myself. I remember picking up the phone, calling my mom and saying, "Mom, it's gonna be the last phone call you get from me. I don't want to live anymore, and it's because of you." I remember picking up the phone, calling my dad and saying, "Dad, you're the reason I don't want to live anymore." I remember picking up the phone, calling the girl at the time and saying, "You've attributed all of this, and I don't want to live anymore." And I remember just going down the list and blaming people for where I was at. And I had some really good roommates at the time, and they called the cops. The cops came, and it wasn't for the grace of God that I got down that day off of the roof. And here I am, standing in front of you smiling, continuing my story. Man, if I could give hope to anybody out there, I'd say this: God isn't for everybody, but He's the only thing that I know. His love has been the most constant and consistent thing. As a broken 9-year-old boy searching for a father and a masculine figure, I found a daddy that would never leave me. I can tell you the same, that love is offered freely, as consistently to you.